Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Attachment Theory in Action. Today, I am going to be having a wonderful conversation, particularly from a male perspective, and delving into how attachment styles show up in men and how this can impact their relationships that they have, whether that be at work or intimate relationships. So today I'm very excited to welcome Ralph Brewer to the podcast. Ralph is the author of Rebuild, the complete guide to starting over as a man, the dead bedroom fix, divorce panic, red flags, and real talk. The no BS advice for young men. His work has been read and listened to by hundreds of thousands of men around the world. Through his writing, podcast, and global men's community, Ralph has become one of the most trusted voices helping men navigate the modern landscape of relationships, masculinity, and personal transformation. I am very excited to have this conversation today. Hi, Ralph. Welcome to the Attachment Theory in Action podcast. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
This is going to be a really great conversation. I'm really excited to get your perspective as a male, as a father, as somebody who works closely with many other males and represents a lot of those voices that maybe don't always get heard in this field. I think that in the professional field, we have a lot of fantastic male figures, but I think in the day-to-day field of families and children and working with children and families, that oftentimes I think that men's voices get overlooked,
Mhm.
and they are just as valuable as the females' voices as well. And so I'm really glad to get your perspective and learn more about the work that you're doing to support men in this area. And so yeah, let's dive in. My regular listeners know that I always like to start with the same question
Mhm.
because this is an attachment-based podcast. Tell us about, was there anything in your early life, your upbringing, or even in just your early career that has kind of led you down this path and the work that you're doing today? Tell us about your story.
Yeah, it's a good one, and I think it's one that a lot of your male listeners will appreciate and can relate to in a big way. I went through a pretty nasty period of my life about 14 years ago. I was married, had three little kids, and I discovered that my then wife was having an extramarital affair, which just led to all kinds of chaos, led to the divorce, led to me having kids most of the time. Um, their mom at the time, my ex-wife, was probably, I know it's not a clinical diagnosis, but it was somewhat of a midlife crisis type of thing, kind of reverting
Okay.
back to some old teenager kind of behavior and stuff. And it was really kind of concerning and scary to a lot of us and left me playing the role of mom and dad for several years. Thankfully, I'm kind of jumping ahead in the story, but my ex is doing much better now. We co-parent, doing very well. We're very friendly. So that is great. But she definitely went through something. And
Okay.
that in turn, I went through something as well. And that was a major, it was kind of ripping the Band-Aid off, so to speak. And it just kind of exposed a lot of wounds, if you will, that I had that I never really had time to sit down with and really explore. And my rock bottom moment was my wife saying, "See you later. These kids are all yours. Goodbye."
Mm.
And that just made me kind of really take a very introspective look at a lot of stuff that I never did before. And how I kind of got there, it wasn't a grand epiphany moment. It was going to a therapist, thank goodness, who in turn said, a lot of you guys don't really have a lot of friends. You guys just do your work and your kids and everything else, and that's it. And she
Mm.
goes, I recommend you to get out there and meet more men and do what you used to do and explore some old interests that you used to have pre-marriage and everything else. Just rediscover yourself. So I did. And part of my rebirth, if you will, was to go back to writing. I used to love writing as a youngster, creative writing. So I got online and started blogging about my experience as a dad starting over in life. And Dad Starting Over is actually a social media handle that I still have that's very popular on Facebook and YouTube and TikTok and so forth. And it reached a lot of men, and some of those men, a lot of those men were like, "Yeah, me too. Been there, done that."
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I talked about one topic in particular. I know this is a real diversion in the conversation, but it'll all make sense in the end. Whenever I talked about sex and marriage, that got a lot
Mhm.
of attention. So I could talk about starting over and finances and health and fitness and going through the divorce and custody of the kids and raising kids and so-so response. But as soon as I talked about my experience in marriage number one compared to what was years later my dating and so forth and then what would become wife number two in the bedroom department,
Mhm.
that's when men woke up and said, now this I can really relate to. That got more attention than anything. So I actually
Mhm.
wrote a book on the subject because a guy suggested that I write a book on the subject, and it kind of took off. So much so that three editions of that book have come out since then. And that book first came out like 9 years ago. So three editions in 9 years. And that book is called The Dead Bedroom Fix. And a lot of
Mhm.
people know me just from that book alone. So a lot of people know me as the bald guy who talks about the sexless marriage stuff. So how that kind of ties into the attachment thing is that because of that book, I started getting all kinds of emails and correspondence from men from all over the world. And we all, I say we because I'm one of them, we all have a lot in common. And the thing that we have in common, if you have to kind of shrink it down to one little nugget of information, is we are all very anxiously attached to our romantic partners. We're
Mhm.
always seeking reassurance. We're always, are you okay? We're always trying to fix things. I'm the type of guy that when I walk in the room and I can see a look on my wife's face that's quite a little off, I recognize it immediately. And I got to fix it. I got to get to the bottom of what the heck's going on so everybody can be happy. One of those guys. Well,
Mhm.
wouldn't you know it, we tend to, as men, connect to very avoidant women. The women that, as soon as the honeymoon phase passes in the relationship, they're just like, can you just please stop and leave me alone? Which just drives us further nuts and just makes
Right.
us want more reassurance. So that's what I hear again and again. And I mean, every day, all day, I'm hearing from anxiously attached men. So we actually created a support community for men where we talk about this stuff. And I'd say probably, heck, I don't know, 90% of our men are anxiously attached men that have been with or are currently with very dismissive, avoidant women, to use the
Mhm.
vernacular. So you're not in your head. I'm sure you've heard this quite a bit. Usually it's with the genders reversed. Usually it's the women that are the anxiously attached ones and the men that are like rolling their eyes going, oh, please, can we stop talking? I don't want to talk. The difference seems to be with these avoided men is that they have that baseline level of testosterone libido that's just basically like, wife, can we go to bed now? Can we go to bed now? But with the women, they don't necessarily. So the not only does that emotional connection dissipate with those avoidant women post honeymoon phase, but the sexuality obviously does too. And you're
Mhm.
just not even roommate. That's not even the right term for it. Just people that happen to live under the same roof, living two parallel lives, and that's what the wives want. They just want that hyper independence. Leave me the heck alone. And these
Mhm.
poor men are in hell because of it.
Um, so there's so much to unpack in what you've just explained. First of all, thank you for sharing just a little bit of your story
Mhm.
with us. And I think I don't disagree with you that there's a lot of women that the roles are often reversed, but I think the more and more we talk about it, we realize that there's a lot more of a more even field of, we have people in relationships. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we tend to seek out somebody who will reconfirm what we believe about ourselves. And so, if we are anxious, if we have an anxious attachment, we need somebody to constantly reaffirm that we're good enough, that we love them, that we care about them, that they're not going anywhere. And so it it makes sense that then we seek out someone who reaffirms that belief that we're not good enough. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So the dismissive person pushes away, and that reconfirms in me that I'm not good enough, that something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always have to constantly check in, like, is that still the case? Is this happening? Um, So tell me a little bit from your perspective, Ralph, let's learn a little bit more about your early life
Hmm.
experiences. Where do you maybe see some of this anxious attachment style have developed for you? Where did that come from, do you think?
Obviously, my parents. The more I learn about my parents, which honestly, when I learned about their past, because I mean, this stuff is generational, right?
Hmm.
Um, what I learned about my parents really didn't come until later in life. My father passed away at a young age at 53. And I didn't know a whole heck of a lot about his past until after he passed away. And I guess my mother felt more comfortable to go, now that he has passed, let me share some stories about your dad's
Hmm.
past. And then I go, well, now it makes a lot of sense based on some of the stuff I knew. And I always kind of knew about my mother's past and put those two together. Oh my goodness, the dysfunction. Oh, it was bad. My mother is from Spain, and she was raised in post-Civil War Franco Spain, where people were made to disappear sometimes. And
Mm.
my mother's father was one of those who Franco basically said, "Don't like you anymore." Now, whether he was killed, sent off to prison, or was that just an excuse and he just left the family? I don't know. But he basically disappeared and was never to be seen again. And he left
Wow.
a wife and 7 kids. And so my
Wow.
mother was the next youngest kid of the family. And basically, from what I'm hearing, the mother had very narcissistic tendencies. My mother never said that, but just her description is like, oh, it was bad. A lot of punishing the kids, a lot of shaming the kids for a lot of things. And the kids basically all just took off to different parts of Europe and left my mom and her younger brother basically as the only two left there. And she had to put up with mom, and it wasn't good. And so
Mm.
when an American GI who was stationed in Spain said, "Hello, here I am," she's like, "When can we leave?" So they got
Right.
married, got hitched, and they had me shortly thereafter. We lived in Europe for a little bit and then moved to the States when I was about 3 or 4 years old. So we have my father's side is that his mother was the type to jump from man to man, from what I understand, and leave kids in her wake, unfortunately. And
Mm.
so my dad's dad was a World War II veteran who had a PTSD, alcoholism, the whole 9 yards. So those two, I guess, were, I'm trying to get the timeline straight, divorced. My dad's with mom. Mom says, "See you later," and leaves with
Mm.
grandparents. So he is raised by grandparents who are basically like, we're too old to be raising some little kid. My father hyper achieved in school, valedictorian of his school, hyper brainy, perhaps neurodivergent if I had to kind of dig in there a little bit, ADHD, maybe on the spectrum. I don't know, but he checked a lot of boxes. And he basically rekindled a relationship with his mother in his teenage years later on, and then she left him again. And
Oh,
so that was
goodness.
oh my goodness, heartbreaking. And so he did what a lot of kids do. F all you people, I'm joining the Air Force. And the Air Force is like, yay, we're sending you to Vietnam.
Mm.
So there was a lot of not so good stuff that happened in Vietnam. He was in a helicopter accident. He was injured. He got horrible. And then he was still in the Air Force and stationed in Spain. That's where he met my mother. So you can see where those two coming together is like, holy crap. Now they tried. They really did. There was a lot of positives to my childhood. One of the things I always harp on is that my parents were very big on, son, you're gifted, you're intelligent, you can be whatever the heck you want to be. We will support you with whatever you want to be. My mom and dad were the type like, if you want to be a doctor, be a doctor. You want to be an astronaut, you be an astronaut. My father always used to say, because I was quite the little entertainer as a kid, he always used to say, "Son, do me a favor. When you become a millionaire Hollywood actor later in life, don't forget your dad." So they were really big on, you got a lot of possibilities, kid, right? And we'll support you in whatever it is. But at the same time, my dad grew to be later, boy, if we had to put a label on him attachment wise, I'd say disorganized because it was very avoidant in some ways, leave dad alone. But in other ways, I watched him constantly reaching for my mother for affection and reassurance.
Mm.
And then when it came to the affection and reassurance, my mother was very good. She was very good about a lot of things. She wasn't very loving to like pets and animals. I remember her being very cold towards our animals, but my father was very, me and my dad were very like, oh, puppies and kitties. And she was just like rolling her eyes at us like, oh my gosh, these guys. Um, that was basically their relationship. But on the other hand, temperament wise, my mother was and still is, she's still around. I've known a lot of people in my life. I've worked with a lot of men. The most neurotic human being I've ever met is my mother. And that is, I know I'm a little biased in that, but oof, she's up there. And she is, paint a picture for her. One day we had two separate flights out of the airport at the same time. So I said, I'll drive you to the airport. The 45-minute drive to the airport, I counted because I knew what was coming. I think it was 18 times she put herself down in that 45-minute drive. I
Wow.
can't do this. I can't. But everyone seems to be so good at this, but not me. I don't understand. Why can't I do this? And just, it's exhausting. She's
Mm,
she's not necessarily blaming, and although she does talk about others, but she more so on herself. Very self-deprecating, constantly, and that's what I grew up with. And it was basically she would emote a lot to me. My father was gone in the military, so he'd have to go to Norway for a couple of months, Turkey for 3 or 4 months, where else? Bahrain, during all these wars that were constantly breaking out, it seems. And so I was left alone with a very hyper neurotic mom, and not good. And that taught me to be, I guess it affected my nervous system, and I was always on edge. And then when my father was home, it was a lot of work. My father was just very much a workhorse. Son, we're going to do this, this, and this. So if he was at home on a summer day, I remember my anxiety would be through the roof because I'd wake up knowing like, oh God, it's going to be working from sun up to sundown. I
mm,
wasn't able to play with my friends like everybody else was. So some not so good stuff, and that led me to being attracted to when I looked at all my girlfriends because I was a cute kid. I had a personality about me. It was there's something about me that attracted girls to me. But sure enough, when I looked back on my relationships, it was every time there was a really normal girl, came from a good family and everything else, I would be like, too normal, too makes me
mhm,
uncomfortable. You know, she's well known in the area. Her family's normal. Her dad's this big shot, whatever. I don't like it. And then here comes Miss Dysfunctional. My father sexually abused me and all these other things. And I was just like, sure, come on in. That was
mhm,
every girlfriend I had was like that. And then when I was 17 years of age, one of them said, "You want to go to the dance with me?" And I said, "Yes." Very type A, controlling kind of girl who was really in charge of things. Straight A student, the whole athlete, star athlete, the whole 9 yards. And I just went along for the ride, Mr. Passive, sure, whatever. And that woman eventually became my wife. And we went through all of college together and everything else. So that's in a nutshell my story,
That's a that is a very, very complex story.
isn't it?
And one of the things that is coming to my mind as I'm hearing you talk about these experiences is this idea of, which I think can happen a lot in an anxious attachment style, is this kind of people pleasing. Like, I
Hmm.
wonder if during those childhood years and early teen years, you constantly felt like, okay, I need to maintain the status quo here. I need to, like, if mom's anxious, I need to constantly check in and what do I need to do to make her less anxious? What do I need to do to make dad pleased? Okay, I need to go out to work all day, all night for him. And then when mom's here, I need to be that emotional base for her constantly. Would that be, is that kind of accurate?
I think so. Yeah. No, I didn't verbalize that at the time, but in hindsight, yeah, I was the entertainer that I mentioned. I was a little comedian. I was voted class
Mm,
clown. So I was always trying to win the favor of people and get a laugh in the room. And nothing made me happier than when my mom and dad were laughing their butts off at something that I did. I remember my mom laughing until she cries. It's one of the best things ever, you know. And my father again saying, like, son, you're going to be famous one of these days. That just filled me with all kinds of joy, sure. So it was
mhm,
constantly trying to win the favor of. And it was it's sad to say, but it was definitely an undercurrent of at baseline, just by being me, I don't deserve love and affection. I have to earn it consistently via the
mhm,
work, via the entertaining, via the listening to mom, via the what's wrong mom, and all this other stuff. Yeah, that was a constant theme in my childhood for sure.
mhm. And I mean, now or through the work that you've done, you've been able to recognize how that shows up in your adult relationships.
Mhm.
Now, you talk a lot about obviously intimate relationships. Did you ever see any of that style coming up in professional or work relationships?
Well, I was actually when you were saying that, I was thinking of friendships.
Okay. Hmm.
All of my personal male platonic friendships, they were all dysfunctional too. Oh my goodness, my one of my friends, I'm going to make up names here so we don't call them out.
That's fine.
Johnny. Johnny's mother bounced from man to man. Interesting.
Hmm.
Um, David's family, highly dysfunctional parents seemed to hate each other, and on and on and on. They were all like that. Very
Hmm.
few, just perfectly normal moms and dads living together long term. I just didn't see that at all. Now, professionally, I was probably took after my dad in a ways. My dad was very hyper. My dad, for example, was what they call a non-commissioned officer. He was an enlisted man, so he didn't go to university and then become a captain or whatever, you know, an officer. He just enlisted, And so he became like you see the guys with the stripes. So he was a sergeant. He retired from the Air Force as a chief master sergeant. And he
Okay.
won NCO of the year in the state of Indiana, I don't know how many times. So he's pretty well regarded. He invented some things that helped out in the military and all kinds of cool stuff. So hyperachieving, I kind of took that mantle in terms of if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. That was one of my
Mhm.
father's mantras, which can go a little too far and can lead to some burnout and everything else. But still, it was I'm going to get hired by Acme Company, not a real company name, fake company name. I'm going to be the best employee they've ever had. And I hit the ground running. I remember day one, if you could be in the lobby by 8 a.m., we'll be there to show you around to your new office. I was there at 7:25, right? Just eager and waiting, ready to go. I was that guy. So I kind of took
Mhm.
that energy into whatever it is I did. And I was known kind of as that guy, hyperachieving, go, go, go guy. But it did come to an end in terms of I couldn't withstand the company politics of all of it. It was just so nonsense, and it wore me down. And I was just like, eventually, I ended up quitting my corporate job, and went into the entrepreneurial world, which is what I've been in since. So how my childhood and attachment and everything affects my ability to work for others, I don't know. Is there an
Mhm.
ADHD component there? Because I do become somewhat hyper obsessive about certain topics and things. I don't just kind of have a passing interest in something. I completely get into something and research the bejesus out of it. Something that I learned that my father was the same way about. He just didn't get into woodworking. We had an entire woodworking shop in our basement. Every square inch was very expensive woodworking tools. I mean, dude, that's me. And I've learned
Uh-huh.
it's very common in my world. I hear about all the guys in my men's group. We're all very similar in that way.
I think something that I've heard talked about before, and maybe this will resonate with you, that what happens then is you find yourself, and this, I think this is, I've heard men talk about this, so I'm making an assumption, but
Mhm.
I have not heard as many women talking about it, but that you you become very successful at work. And then you find that you're not being successful in your personal life, in the marriage particularly. And so that then creates like this massive feeling of kind of failure. Like, why am I so successful here, but I can't be successful at home? And
Mhm.
it's because of, well, at least what I'm thinking, it may be because of what you've just described. You've had these two very opposing experiences of caregiving, not just opposing in terms of mom versus dad, but just the inconsistency between the two of them as well in caregiving for you, that now you're taking one piece of that and it's applying it to the work and you're being successful, but the other side of it
Mhm.
is kind of causing this massive sense of failure.
Mhm.
And I think I've heard a lot of men talking about that.
Oh, absolutely. We hear that all the time. And it's not unusual for me to speak to a hyper successful. I started my own company. Now it's worth, 9 figures and like really hyper successful guys, but he hasn't touched his wife in 16 years.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we've come up with a phrase. What do we say in the group? A king at home or a king at work and like a nobody at home. That's pretty
Hmm.
common. No respect. And it's not uncommon for them to get no respect from their children, no respect from anybody. There's just kind of this underlying theme of like roll their eyes at dad. He's just this bumbling fool at home, but at work, he's the real somebody.
Hmm.
We hear that quite a bit. Yeah.
So when we had our kind of pre-conversation,
Hmm.
you had mentioned and we had kind of talked about uh, that some of the men that you have encountered are really like adverse to talking about their early life experiences,
Hmm.
for many different reasons, all of which are legitimate reasons. Um, and so in your conversations with them, how have you helped them to understand that this early life stuff is not just therapy, mumbo jumbo, fluffy stuff. Like this can really impact and show up in your life right now.
You know what really hits guys between the eyes is when you complete their sentences for them. When you're like, oh, yeah, let me guess. And you say whatever. And then they're wide eyed and go, okay, that's creepy. How did you know that? It's like, oh, I don't know because I've heard it literally 1,500 times this year from other men. Dude, you're not alone. And I'll
Mhm.
tell you what the commonality is. Let me guess. Mom, dad, da da da. Yeah,
Mhm.
pretty much. Sometimes you're a little off, but usually you're right around the ballpark of what's going on. That's where men go, all right, yeah, there's something to this. Sure. I'm getting less and less pushback on that. I think it's because in popular culture, therapy is much more accepted, men and women alike, and so forth. And there's so much social media material about attachment and so forth out there that I think it's getting in the zeitgeist, so to speak, that this is a legit thing. But when I very first started out, it was typically like, yeah, my dad, a guy will say, yeah, my dad beat me, but we have since, made amends and we're cool, but I don't see how that affects anything now. I dealt with it. We're past it. Here we are now. It's like, no, that still has a major effect on how it is that you attach to people and the type of people you attach to. And the fact that your mother, cheated on your father 3 or 4 times and now your wife cheated on you, I don't think that's a coincidence.
Mhm.
And every girlfriend you've ever been with has cheated on you, also not a coincidence. What's
Mhm.
funny is that a lot of men are very black and white thinkers. That there's not a lot of gray area and nuance here. It's just duh, ones and zeros, very binary thinking. And so, for a lot of men, for example, let's say you have a guy who's like, I've had 3 or 4 girlfriends and every single one of them has cheated on me. And then I got married. I thought I found the one and she cheated on me too. His binary thinking is what? All women cheat, or at
Mhm.
least the vast majority do. Duh, it's the easiest solution. What is the Occam's razor? Sometimes the easiest solution is the correct one.
Mhm.
It's much more difficult and painful to say, no, there's something about you that is attracted to these type of people and that attracts them to you. Okay, well then how do we remedy that? Well, let's really dig into what's going on. Oh, here we go. Now it's going to be months and months of talking to somebody and reading this and trying to figure out. It is way simpler to say all women are, insert bad word here, done.
Yes.
And you also you get back at those that hurt you. I mean, what better
Mhm.
way to get back at somebody to say you are flawed and evil and terrible just by virtue of your gender? So you're a woman, therefore fill in the blank. That's a really good way of getting back at them and saying, cross your arms, and say, ha ha, take that, women.
Mhm.
That makes you feel good for a moment to get back at all those people that hurt you. It's way, way more difficult to say, your mommy and daddy weren't perfect, and that had a lot to do with this, and this, and that's how you got to where you're at today. But
Mhm.
a lot of pushback you get from some guys is, okay, cool, I get it, make a lot of sense, but so what? You know,
Mhm.
I'm just going to relive all that pain and go through all of that. Well, I'll tell you what the so what is. If you don't get to the bottom of it and do these little daily things, by the way, this is a day to day thing that you're going to have to work on. It's kind of like being an alcoholic, day at a time type of thing. If you don't learn how to put up boundaries, if you don't learn how to act on your little gut instinct, if you don't learn to have some self respect and everything else, guess what? You're going to end up right here all over again. And the men that I talk to, as soon as woman number one dumps him, he is very quickly looking for woman number two. He
Mhm.
doesn't waste any time. The men that I talk to don't like to be alone. And they're very quickly on the dating apps. They're very quickly trying to fill their coffers and their sense of self worth via outside validation. And
Mhm.
nothing makes them feel better than some type of loving and, yes, sexual connection with another human being, with a woman. That makes him feel like $1,000,000,000,000. And he will not want to give that up. And he will see red flag after a red flag, things that make him say, this person is probably not long term relationship material. And he'll just look right over that and just keep right on going because he never addressed the really core issues that got him there in the first place. And these guys will be married 5 or 6 times before they finally get the idea like, oh, maybe it is me after all.
So Ralph, what helped you? Now you mentioned on just like it being a daily habit and daily, things
Hmm.
that you need to be doing. What helped you kind of, and again, healing is a journey. We always continue healing, we always can
Hmm.
continue learning, but what helped you overcome some of those challenges that you faced and working towards having a healthy relationship with your current spouse?
You know what has really helped me? And it's going to sound weird, but it's true. Anyone who has ever gotten better at a certain kind of discipline or something, whatever that thing is, will tell you, you know how I got better at it? I taught it and
Mm,
I got to talk to other people going through it. So basically, I'm having like little mini therapy sessions, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them for the last decade plus of talking to men, and we all learn from each other. And sometimes it's one-on-one little coaching sessions with me. Basically, it's like a mentorship. Guys that are like, "Hey,
Mhm.
guy who's been there and done that, help me out." That's who I am. So I help them out. Then we have group meetings and we all talk to each other. And invariably, you leave with some little moment, little aha moment. Well, that's interesting. I like that. I'll take that. Or you learn what not to do. And I think that is what helped expedite my process of getting better. If I had just sat back and just watched YouTube videos and read book, no, it wouldn't have done it. It's working with others, and I think that's especially true for us guys because we're so averse to creating our social groups and getting out there and networking and stuff for whatever reason. We all want to be lone wolves. But I realized early on, like, no, this is where you expedite the process of healing is talking to others. So for sure, working with others and recognizing I'm not alone, it certainly helped, and I'm not going to BS you. There is a hint of luck involved in the my spouse Natalie, who I'm with now. I happen to be with somebody who is probably, if I had to put the attachment style on there, she probably leans more anxious, but probably more secure than I was when we met. But she has some of those anxious tendencies based on her own background and so forth. So I matched up well there. And so we're a very snuggly, touchy kind of couple that at the end of the day, we want nothing more than to snuggle on the couch and talk and that kind of thing. So,
Mhm.
hallelujah, I met somebody like that. And it's persisted for over a decade now, like this, right? That could have definitely gone the other way, and I could have been really tested. Now, in the relatively short period of time where I was dating, I was tested. It was, and those were really tough for me. I've learned that a guy like me, hyper anxious, gets really attached, falls in love really hard, and so forth. Um, Nothing tests us more than, let's say you have a big breakup, divorce, or whatever. And then you're dating somebody and you're like, oh my gosh, there's nothing wrong with this one. She's amazing. She makes me feel like $1 million. This is great. And then you see the thing, whatever the thing may be. It's a true story. One of the things that I saw was with a gal, and I went to her house, and in the kitchen trash can was filled with wine bottles. And I'm like, huh. I went to throw something away. I'm like, couldn't even open the little flap because it was just filled with wine bottles. And back of my head, catalog that like, is she just sitting there chugging wine all day long? Did she have a party recently? Maybe this is like months worth of wine bottles. Just set it aside, right? Right. And then sure enough, one day we were talking on the phone and she was slurring her words a little bit. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh no, surely it's not. Put in the back of my head, moving on, right? Because she makes me feel great. And then the second time that happened, I'm like, I can't ignore this anymore. It's like, Ralph, you need to yank your head out of your butt. And I confronted her in a passive aggressive, I guess you could say, way. I texted her. This is something I noticed. Is there something going on? And she denied it. And then later, for whatever reason, came back and said, you got me. You're right. I'm an alcoholic. I got a problem. And I was like, well, good knowing you, but this isn't for me right now. I wish you all the best. Heart pounding out of chest, sweating. To break up with somebody was really tough. But I had to do that several times where I'm like, this ain't working for me. So it's kind of a repetition thing and realizing my worth and realizing it's not up to me to fix her. Maybe old me would have said, like, I can fix you. Let's go to some meetings. Let's do this. And then you realize, like, no, no, Ralph, you got to let him go, buddy. You're not, your job's not to fix everybody. Your job's not to see the best in everyone. That's what we all say, right? I know in there, deep
Mhm.
in there somewhere, she's a really good person. That's who I fell in love with. And all, no, man, you got to let them go. It's those little lessons over and over and over again that kind of hammer home these things. And then doing the things, this is really big for a lot of men that do build confidence within yourself. It sounds silly and shallow, but one of the first things a lot of men do is go to the gym, work on their
Mhm.
body. And it's
Mhm.
huge for a lot of guys. Exerting that energy, pushing your body's meant to do this kind of stuff. That's how we're engineered. Push and pull things and exert yourself and collapse at the end of the day. And what you know what? I feel less anxious. It's funny how that works. And if I stop eating crap and I actually have good food in my body, and anxiety goes down again. And then you have less inflammation and other things that affect your moods and everything else. So that's like a piece of it. And then when you start filling out a shirt in a good way and you start getting attention from the opposite sex, and yes, men saying, looking good, buddy, you start standing a little taller and you feel a little better about
Mhm.
yourself. That's a piece of it. It's a giant jigsaw puzzle of pieces that all work in concert with each other. And that's a big part of it, the physical thing, which affects the mental thing. And then maybe you have a little success at work. Maybe you're a little bit more confident. Maybe now you're growing your social network. Maybe now you're attending some meetings, working one on one with all these
Mhm.
little things just build up and eventually become a much more secure individual. But as you know, little things, what's the word? Trigger you every now and then. And you go right back to the little old Ralphie boy, nervous about something. Still to this day, something the wife does, no fault of hers whatsoever, will just make me go feel yucky, make me
Mhm.
feel not so good. And that's okay. That's something I have to tell a lot of men is it's okay. It's okay just to sit in your yucky and just feel like,
Mhm.
what's going on with me right now? Why is my heart rate a little elevated? Why am I a little because of this and this? Yeah, so what? It's okay, dude. It's because this, and this. You haven't dealt with it. Just think about it. It's all right. You're not going to die. She's not going to leave you. You're not going to, you'll be fine. And that's something you have to kind of tell yourself again and again. But there's an army of people out there that are trying to sell you on anytime you feel something just a little bad, you have to fix it now. Fix it now. Take this
Mhm.
thing I shared this story before many times on my podcast and so forth that several years after my ex and I discovered the affair. By the way, when I discovered her affair, it was while on vacation in Florida, of all places. The laptop, logged in somewhere, right? And I went back to a beach, not the beach, but a beach several years after the fact. As soon as I got on that beach and I heard the sound of the ocean and I smelled the sea salt, it took me right back. And I felt anxious and I felt not so good. And my girlfriend, who would become wife at the time, could see it in my face. And she's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, it's just weird being back here." And she's like, "Oh, I'm sure it must be." I was like, "Yeah, I'll be fine." But I shared that story with others to show, like, even years later, you're still going to have those
Mhm.
little feelings and it's okay. My inbox and my comments on social media was bombarded with people telling me, you need to take this THC marijuana thing for anxiety. You need to go read this book. You need to talk to this. I mean, people were just like, he has bad feelings, must fix now. I'm like, people, you missed the entire point. The point is that it's okay to be a human being and have yucky feelings every now and then.
Uh-huh.
It's not going to kill you. And that's something I had to learn too the hard way.
It's so interesting to me, Ralph, that the what you're speaking is, I mean, it's the work that I do and my organization does on a daily basis. Like, so some of what you've brought out is those micro doses of connection that allow somebody to do a little bit of processing and a little bit of reflecting, and then we move on, right? And as you've pointed out, at least the stereotype is that, men don't go to therapy, they don't like talking about their feelings. And actually, what you've described is the therapy is happening in those microdoses of
Mhm.
connection. And it doesn't have to be go and sit and talk for an hour about your feelings, which I love. So I love that you're doing that and you're promoting that with the men that you're working with because I think that it's very valuable. Um, and it offers what we would call felt safety, that okay, we can go here for a little bit and I'm not going to judge you and I'm also not going to make you sit in it for forever.
Mhm.
But that also brings me to you use terminology that we use in our treatment setting and that's sitting in the yuck that
Oh, really?
sometimes we just have to sit with it. Yeah,
Mhm.
and there's you can't go back and change what your mom and dad did and how that environment that you were in. And that's not to minimize it. It's to say, like, this has come from a place, and we recognize that place that it's come from, and we can provide empathy if appropriate for it. And we can sit with it. And we don't have to try and fix it in this moment. We may not be able to fix it at all. And so it's okay to feel these feelings. And as we say to kids, it's just, it's not always okay to act on those feelings in ways that are unhealthy or hurtful or, harmful to somebody else or to your relationship, right? Because that's often what
Mhm.
happens is we have a feeling and then we act on it and it causes harm to a person or to a relationship
Mhm.
before we've really sat back and sat with it and said, ah, this is where it's coming from. It's not really coming from necessarily something this current person is doing. It's coming from the past, but it's going to impact how I'm showing up. with this current person. So I really love that you encourage people just to sit with it and, not always jump to how do I stop this or how do I fix
Mhm.
this?
The difficulty is that some of us are way more sensitive than others, more traumatized than others, and for some of them, sitting in it results in a whole lot of rumination
Mm,
and a spiraling out of control type of thing, and they need some, 911 type of help. So,
mhm,
different course of action for different people. But for most people, it's you got to just tell them you're not going to die. You're okay. She's not going to go anywhere. You guys are fine. Everything's good. And you need to hear that a few thousand times for it to sink in and then see it in practice in terms of, like you said, those little micro doses. Very well put.
mhm. I like what you just said too about the thousands of times. So that's something that comes up a lot in our work too with families who are working with a child who's maybe, 13, 14, 15 years old. And it's very, very hard for adults to understand how much repetition is needed. When you've
Mm.
spent the first 12 years of your life having the same repeated experiences, your brain is wired a certain way. Those pathways, those, connections of, well, when this happens, this is the result. Or, when this happens, I have to act this way, and then this is going to happen as a result of that. Um, and I think that adults really forget how much is then needed to rewire those experiences, to redirect those pathways, those patterns.
This is way evident. So you have like a perfect storm of issues here where you have a guy, let's say, who's very anxiously attached. Therefore, he wants to fix his relationship with his wife, who more often than not is very avoidant in her attachment. And so, if you want to level with that man and be completely honest, you say, is there hope? Yeah, actually, there is. But I'll tell you what, buddy, you better be patient because we're talking about two 40-some-year-olds who have, decades of being wired in a certain way. And what you're saying is, can we fix this? Yeah, but do you realize how much that's going to take? Like, she has to, number one, say, I need a little help here. I'm doing things that drive away my loved ones, and that's a huge step in itself.
Mhm.
And then that starts the process of, and by the way, it's not going to look like this. It's going to look like, and go back 5 steps and did it. And then you, Mr. Anxious, are just going to be like, I'm putting in all this work. I'm putting in all this work. And you're a year from now going to be a completely different person. And you're going to look at your spouse and go, huh? And she's going to say, give me a few more years. And what a lot of men say is like, I don't know if I have the patience for that. And
Mhm.
that's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people that I talk to come to the grand epiphany, dare I say, most of them that I talk to come to the grand epiphany of this relationship was pretty doomed from the beginning. It was founded on insecurity. Two
Mhm.
wildly insecure individuals got together for all the wrong reasons. And yeah, you made kids and everything else, but oof, this ain't gonna work. That's what most guys come to. Now, me saying that verbally, I just lost half my audience right there because my audience is anxiously attached men who want nothing more than to make this relationship with this woman work. And for a
Mhm.
guy to say, you're going to put in the work, and most of you will eventually say, I'm going to go over here instead. And they don't like to hear that. So it's a tough sell.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and it is very complex, very, very complex because we're human beings, right? And I want to point out too, like nothing that I have heard you say is bashing women.
Mm.
Nothing is bashing men. We are human beings showing up with extreme complex experiences, histories, emotions, and can we figure out a way to move forward together?
Mhm.
Can we do that together? And sometimes yes, and sometimes no. And that is not to say that there aren't hurtful men or hurtful women out there, because there absolutely is.
Mhm.
But the majority of people are really trying to do the best they can with what they have. You and the best way to do that is to recognize, how am I showing up? What am I bringing to this relationship? What is it that I have to give? Um, and and use that as a starting point for figuring out how do we move through this together. Um,
Now, if you'd like, I can yell at the ladies for a little bit because there is something that the ladies need to work on. There is a lot of messaging out there that a lot of anxiously attached men have heard. a whole bunch of times, and they have taken it and they have ingested it, which is be more vulnerable, be more open with your feelings. Dude, don't be closed off. And you're an anxious guy and you hear this and you're like, you got it, but boom, and they unload on their women. Now, some of the stuff that they say to their ladies, who tells them I need you to open up a little bit more, may hurt the ladies' feelings.
Hmm.
One of the best examples of this that I hear a lot of men say that ends up in a big fight is, wife, we had a couple of kids, and the kids are now 6 and 8 years old or whatever it is. And I'm telling you, wife, ever since we had these kids, I feel kind of forgotten as your spouse. We used to be so connected in that way and everything else, but now we're just two people living under the same roof. And, I have guys that tell me like he'll be in the middle of telling a story about his work or whatever, and the wife will just walk right out of the room because she's on her phone, stressed out about something kid related or whatever. And so, that happens a few hundred times. Eventually say like, and you don't touch each other and everything. I feel forgotten. He says that to the wife. Oh my goodness, you just anger, fury. How dare you, you baby? Like, I don't need another baby in the house and blah, blah, blah. You need to grow up. And that's one example, but that's the most common, most painful example. But there are other little things where whenever the guy emotes, usually avoidant woman, duh, this is going to be her response. But a lot of women in general kind of eye rolling, like, oh, here we go.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of ladies, it's popular culture discourse or whatever it may be that influences this, need to soften up a little bit. Kind of strange hearing a man say that about the ladies. Like, if you want him to open up and you want to be vulnerable, you need to accept it in a healthier way. The last thing, Mr. Anxiously Attached, who's trying to be a more secure guy and he's trying to express his boundaries and he's trying to be more communicative in a healthy way. The last thing he wants is for when he does it in a very healthy way for his wife to go, bad boy, you should feel shamed for having those feelings. Because he will
Hmm.
instantly shut off just like that. And he'll come back to me and say, see, Ralph, it doesn't work. When I try with my loved ones, any woman in my life has treated me this way. So, ladies, you got some work to do in that department. So men can feel
Absolutely.
so men can feel safe to express themselves in that way. Because there's an army of men out there telling men, don't you dare do that. It's just going to cause all kinds of problems. Just swallow it and swallow it and swallow it. Save it for your guy friends. Don't ever emote in any way, shape, or form to your female partner. And that's unfortunate.
Hmm. Yeah, unfortunate is a great word for that because, and I don't disagree with you. I think that it takes work on both parts. Even if you are a very securely attached woman with a secure attachment style, it takes work on it always takes reflection on yourself and again how you're showing up in the relationship. And it shouldn't just be a one-sided effort to make something work. And I think that, I would speak personally that I have to reflect on what I bring to a relationship and can be that slightly dismissive person. And so I fully acknowledge that there are pieces that women have to work on as well. But I am so grateful that you have brought this voice of the men to this podcast, Ralph. It's been a great conversation. Um, Tell me, let's finish real quick about
Hmm.
how do you feel this has maybe shown up in the parenting of your children? Because you mentioned at the beginning that, you took on the role of mom and dad. Um, how has your parenting evolved as you've learned more about yourself and your attachment style and how you show up?
I would say probably much more cognizant, much more purposeful in terms of if I see some little specific instance of something. For example, um, my oldest son, who's now 19 years of age, had his first girlfriend when he was in high school. And I saw some things that were made me go, Now, in fairness, I'm probably a little bit more sensitive than the average dude, considering all the horribleness I've heard over the years. But what I saw was I met her parents, and it was not a healthy relationship that I saw in the 10 minutes that I saw them together. And so we were talking about his girlfriend, who, strangely, highly successful athlete, highly successful student. Like, this sounds familiar. Dysfunctional parents, that sounds familiar. So you don't immediately go to the kid and go, she's just like your mom. That's not going to go well. So it's like, so I go, I know you two have probably done the whole when we get married and all this other stuff. That's what all you teenage kids do when you fall in love and everything else, right? But something to think about, son. I go, what do you think about her mom and dad? Like, do you like their relationship? And he just laughed. He goes, no. I said, why not? Because her dad's like miserable and he just sits on his chair all day and never talks. And the mom basically is just the ruler over everything. I go, I'm just going to put this out there, son. What you see there is probably what's going to happen down the line. Not guaranteed, but more than likely. And you could see the kind of wheels turning.
Mm,
Eventually, he got dumped, whatever. But still, I think I'm much more, oh, what's the word? Uh, um, Purposeful in that kind of communication in that way. When recognizing such situations, I will immediately. Different little things with my younger son. I have full custody of my younger son now. He's 14 years of age. And my older daughter, who's going into grad school and so forth. Just those little purposeful life moments where probably old Ralph would have been like, oh, that sucks. And that's about
yeah.
the end of it. But now it's like life lesson time. Put on my Coach Ralph hat and go, son, daughter, it's not so good there. I remember my daughter had a moment where one of her boyfriends cheated on her, or so she was told from friends of friends kind of thing. And you have to go, daughter, you know how I feel about that. It's not good.
Mhm.
You deserve better than that. Time to let this one go. I know, I know. And eventually she did. But it's those little life relationship oriented moments I'm much more purposeful about now. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, that's, I wouldn't want you to have had to go through emotional hardship, but it's just wonderful that you're able to take those experiences and use them as you said, like intention with intentionality and being purposeful, and helping your own kids navigate the complexities of relationships for sure.
hmm Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Ralph, for coming on the podcast and chatting with
Thank
me
you.
today. I really appreciate your insight. Just again, your perspective is fantastic, and just I hope I always say this, but the podcasts always leave my wheels turning, and so I really hope that listeners are thinking about this, and if they are somebody who supports a male professionally, that they can really take some of this insight and use it in their daily work. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.